Sure, yeah. So my name is David Graham. I'm a Danish citizen, and for the last 15 years, I've been working in major corporations as an intrapreneur. So someone who's been driving innovation and change, often against all odds, if you will. And so I've been in the aviation business, I've been in the wind power business, and for the last 8 years, I've been with Lego, where I've had various different positions, but always around driving innovation. So I've been part of building their internal innovation capability, was senior innovation director for their Future Lab, and for the last 2 or 3 years been part of building a new structure, an umbrella organization above the existing business, and a strategic venture arm to invest strategically into future business areas for the company. Yeah, so in terms of its products and services, there are a number of different elements. Obviously, everything around digital, around new technologies, but also around new manufacturing methods, new materials relevant to the company. So it's artificial intelligence, because what happens when the toys become smart and can interact with the child based on their behavior? It's robotics, of course, because toys are becoming physically alive. It's speech and sound, because what happens when toys can actually have a conversation with the child? It's Internet of Things, because when toys get connected, they can then play together, and smart things can be connected around play and learning, and it's even 3D printing and additive manufacturing, because what happens when the user can be empowered to produce their own physical elements, but also what are the future efficient ways of producing physical toys in the future. So these things are all changing the company and industry, but obviously it's also about more general things like how do we attract and retain talents in the future. Because Lego is headquartered in a rural area of Denmark, and many big companies have this challenge of saying, how do they still become the epicenter of the talents in the future? And I think it points a little back to my own career at the moment, because I actually decided to leave Lego and now started my own company called Diplomatic Rebels, which is about empowering entrepreneurs to be more impactful in the organizations, but also help companies build entrepreneurial culture and infrastructure. Okay. So I believe also that the future of work is changing, and that companies, and especially big companies, have to have a different approach to how to attract and retain talents, one that is less binary and finite. Either you are hired full-time in the company and they own you, or you don't exist. Versus in the future, it's going to be a lot of loose connections, and the ecosystem that you're building is also an ecosystem of talent that you can call for when needed for various different projects. So I call myself an entrepreneur in residence. Meaning I'm there temporary, helping companies solve their big problems, but then when it's done, I'm out. I don't want to get stuck in a silo somewhere. And I think that's a tendency we're seeing with a lot, especially among millennials and Gen Zs. They don't want to work that way. And obviously there's a lot of things, but I think through my career, I sort of picked up especially 5 key areas that I typically share, which has to do with how do you operate, what are the behaviors and the habits that you need to adopt as an entrepreneur to be impactful and to survive, quite frankly, to not either burn out and leave or to sort of give up. And the number one is to accept the resistance that there will be in the organization. And it's natural human tendency. It's the fear of the unknown, because what happens to me and my job and my position, if this new reality is happening, what these entrepreneurs are driving, if that happens, will I have a role in that? So there's a lot of human tendency in driving this fear and resistance, and you need to understand and accept it's there, but then also find ways to disarm it. Second step is to then understand the rules that you're breaking. And this has to do with understanding, why is the company behaving the way it is? Why are people thinking the way that they are? What built that? Especially old legacy companies. There's a way of working. There are formal rules, but also informal rules. Understanding those, be respectful for the past, learning from it, so you can build the narrative and the bridge from that past into the future that you are driving, that you're experimenting with. And only when you do that, you'll be able to also pick up the people whose toes you're stepping on along the way, exactly to disarm that resistance. And that brings you to the third point, which is building a tribe. So over time, you need to build more and more fellowship around what you're doing, realizing that this is not just a new product or a service or a project, but it's really a movement within the organization, something that's changing the very fibers of the company, the mindset, the way it's thinking, the way it's working. And obviously this takes years, but you need to create it as a movement. So get fellowship, get more and more people behind. This means being very open, being very inviting, not be this closed, sealed off lab in the corner of the company, but being this open platform that everybody in the organization can engage with. And to do that, you need to also write love letters. So that's my fourth point. Quite literally, you need to be very humble and respectful to other people in the organization, even those that are giving you resistance. Trying to understand, have empathy, like you would in design thinking towards your customers, have it also internally towards your internal stakeholders. Understanding why they're coming from where they are, what the fears they have, what's driving it, how can you help them come on board this new thing, and be respectful that it is the current business paying your salaries, and you are standing on the shoulder of giants looking into the future, right? So you didn't build all this from the get-go. So being very respectful and humble, and as the fifth point, you want to make other people shine. You want to make sure that the earnings and the wins you gain is something that is broadly shared across the company. Even those people that were against you in the beginning, make sure that they shine as well, because then they'll be coming back for more. Then it becomes repetitive and not just a one-off, where after that you want to leave because everybody hates you. No, you want to make sure that everybody loves you towards the end. And it's actually the favorite part, I think, of being an entrepreneur. It is sharing the spoils of success. It is making everyone else shine when things are actually succeeding.
Wow.
Sure. I mean, it's of course the mental model and mindset for this is to see the failures not as failures but as iterations and learning, right? So it's constantly working in a way where you want to get to the point where if this is about to fail, you want to make it happen quick. I've had my share of failures for sure. One concrete thing was that when at the point where we were launching an entirely new product who was not just bricks in a box, it was actually a half digital, half physical product, really integrated, quite advanced. And normally at Lego, when you have to develop a new product, you go through a very lengthy process with a lot of checklists and steps you need to take. And we were sort of a little saying, okay, we need to launch this quicker. Let's just skip all the checklists and get quickly in the market. But we did one mistake because on the box, we had to print what devices, and this would mean phones and iPads and tablets, does this work with? And since it had to do with camera optics and recognition of objects, not all devices would work. So, what we ended up doing was actually putting the wrong data on the box in terms of which operational system and which devices could be leveraged for this. So we put out 10,000 boxes in global distribution, had to manually, with stickers and labels, change all of them, spending hours in warehouses changing this. And I sort of realized, okay, there is a reason why there's these checklists, and maybe some of them are good to have. So my learning was, it's this about understanding the rules you're breaking, and why do I need to break this rule? Is there a good reason why it's there? And I think that's a big part of it, leveraging the existing system and the knowledge that have been built up through many years. It's interesting what's happening, and I mentioned it briefly, but we're seeing the new generations, the millennials and Gen Zs, of not necessarily wanting to work in the big corporate, get stuck in the silo. They want to be independent. They want to know why they're working with the stuff they're working with, and they want to have impact on a personal level. So I think that's going to be the norm in the future, that you need to organize companies in a way where people can feel a closeness to what the mission is and what they're actually driving. Purpose. And so I think in a way that's what I'm doing. So I've been working with entrepreneurship in many years. Now I'm seeing that I could have a purpose in actually making other organizations than just Lego understand how to be entrepreneurial and how to be successful with this. So it's a way that I personally can have more impact. Now, what I would wish for is that the future work market is less binary, is less about either you work here or you don't, but it's like, okay, you can work in 2 or 3 companies in parallel at the same time because there's some strong synergies and these companies are maybe on a joint mission around things. So I believe in the future that people will be more loosely connected. They'll be less stuck in a silo. It'll be less about following a career track up through a hierarchy and more about following projects that you have a high passion for and also a high capability to solve, which then means a high impact potential. And therefore, it's going to be more a sort of a network structure, as you would call an ecosystem around the company. That demands a lot of changes in the contracts that we have in big companies. The HR department, I think, is already in a transition process from being, administration to being strategic and being part of building cultures for companies. And so a lot of things still need to change because at the moment, all these young freelancers are very vulnerable, right? They have typically no insurance, no pension, no financial security. They cannot get a mortgage. They cannot even buy a car. There's a lot of challenges around this model at the moment. So we need it to be a semi, a model where you are both associated with 1 or 2 bigger companies, can get the benefits from being on that salary, but at the same time have independence, being able to also be sort of on a lifelong learning process. I think, education is being disrupted and transformed from being, again, these very time-boxed periods of your life. You are educating yourself. Like, in the first 10 years of your life, you're educating yourself or your career, and then the rest of the time you're supposed to leverage that. You need to be educating yourself constantly. That means education will change as well, and maybe you're spending some of your time constantly educating yourself in places outside your company and spending some time, with your family as well, because we also need to balance that, and sometime in 1 or 2 companies. I think that's sort of the vision I have, at least for a work life that would be balanced and highly interesting and also beneficial for the companies, because they would get people when they're at the best, when they're motivated, when they're passionate, and when they're not needed, they'll be doing something else somewhere else.